Hi everyone and welcome back to the fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel with me, Tom Campbell, for another Elite 11 team reveal ahead, guys, of double game week 28. We've got Craig back on the show for this game week. We are going to be taking a look as well, guys, at blank game week 29, giving you a little look as to what a free hit draft might look like, guys. But of course, we'll focus in on double game week 28 as well. I will put timestamps on the video, of course, if you do want to hop around as well. And of course, head over to fantasyfootballfix.com if you haven't already, if you do want to get your push notifications enabled. But without further ado, guys, let's get right into it. Guys, welcome back to the channel, and Craig, welcome back to yourself as well, mate. I should say straight away we are recording on a different evening, so good on you, Craig, for giving up your Tuesday night to join me now, especially after I talked you into wildcarding last time you were on the show, mate. So we will need to talk around that. But how have you been doing, mate? How's the season been going since the last time we spoke?
It's been going great, Tom. I always complain when I come on, so today I'm going to say it's been going absolutely fantastic. Just what I expected.
Well, look, good on you for coming on, mate. Like I say, last time we were on, we were discussing your kind of the situation you found yourself in the sort of elite manager league, which, goodness me, is a tough one, isn't it? Those are the peers who you judge yourself against, and how you decided you wanted to try and claw back some ground. You knew it was a risk using that wild card probably a little bit earlier than you would have otherwise done to have ranked dictated it. But talk us through it, mate. What happened? What was the thought process, and how did you arrive on that wild card team?
Essentially, I think it started with the idea. I mean, it only started a few hours before we recorded the last time 3 weeks ago, or 3 game weeks ago at least. And had a few niggling injuries, and I just had this idea in my head that there's always a week every year where you say, "Oh, that was the week where I should have wildcarded." And we're heading toward game week 25, or double game week 25, which had loads of doubles, not what you would call FPL optimal doubles, but nonetheless, I decided to put all my chips on those double game weeks in 25 to bet against the house, essentially. And it didn't work, did it? So, and it was all set up for wildcard 24 with then a bench boost into 25, and injuries took their toll
They
on my
savaged
ability to
you,
bench
didn't
boost.
they?
So that,
Yeah, they savaged
yeah,
you, didn't they?
it wasn't pretty,
Yeah.
but it wasn't that it would have been fantastic anyway. So it was a gamble, and it didn't pay off. So there we go. There's no point crying about it. I took a risk.
Not. No, exactly right, and it's not catastrophic, right? So 267k time of recording. Obviously, still got some chips in hand, having to react to those injuries, of course. And we are going to talk in this video, guys, as to how rank can determine transfer and captain strategy, which we think will be an interesting take on how FPL managers react to when these sorts of things play out, which I'm sure will be relevant to some of our viewers. But Craig, we are going to take a little look back now at your team's points for the game week that's just completed before we take a look at how you're setting up ahead of the double game week 28. So let's take a look at how the team presented itself last game week out. Okay, so I suspect, Craig, that people won't have seen the wildcard team that you created and how you've had to react to this. So we can see here that you've had an 83-point total for game week 27 with a -4 as well. So interested to see how the transfers needed to play out. You mentioned that you had some injury troubles. So do you want to just reflect on how that wildcard originally was curated, and then how you had to respond to arrive at what is a healthy point total for game week 27, but with that -4?
Yeah, I mean, Carlos was injured. Trent became injured. I chose to bring in Bradley for the double, which didn't pay off. But I didn't bench boost because I just didn't really have a bench at all. It was relying upon Maguire and Garnacho, and they didn't really. I think they put 7 points between them. So it wasn't. As I say, it was a gamble in itself. So it wasn't like I had the world's most amazing bench boost team for 25, but once the injury started running through it, it became very, very unattractive. So essentially, since then, my rank has just nosedived. And the wild card is gone. So everybody, and it was also, in theory, it was geared to optimize in 24, bench boosting in 25, and it gave me enough options either way, in theory, to deal with what was coming in 29 or what could come in 29.
That's right.
Since then, I've sold, what's his name? Barkley.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I was too hasty, but I just jettisoned on Barkley and went to Palmer. Because the points were just disappearing off the table. So it was like, okay, now I need season keepers from here on.
And it looks like you've
So
got
that
there, right, Craig?
essentially,
In terms of how you're set up right now, in terms of how you've reacted to that type of mentality of season keepers, that feels pretty apparent. Obviously, you've got some players in here to benefit from double game week 28, which we'll come on to when we look at your bus team for double game week 28. But that feels like strategically how you're trying to reorganise things and try and get people or players in that you'd be comfortable keeping for, the remainder.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, at some point tonight, I suppose we'll talk about differentials and having players who others don't have. But most players who I'm up against will have a wild card on the way.
Yeah.
And I need to think about how I don't get completely screwed when everyone else plays their wild card. So I'm thinking ahead for that sense. And it's really just a case of picking out a few diffs here and there to try and make it a bit interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's go through it there, mate. So I've got to ask you straight away. You've had the captaincy on Saka. I mean, obviously a battering that they handed out to the absolutely hapless Sheffield United, which I'm sure on many levels you were pleased to see. But Saka hooked off at half time, having played so well in the first half. That Arsenal contingent, though, you're one of the few I've seen here now with just 2. Rather than 3, Craig. Have you had any thoughts around what the optimal setup is for Arsenal players, for FPL managers? I asked last week, and we were wondering whether or not 2 defensive and 1 midfielder being Saka it was optimal. Is that how you see it, or would you see with the amount of goals they're scoring, is it time to pivot? What do you think?
I think it's the latter. I think a few weeks ago I'd have said Saliba with no question of a doubt. But the fact that, I mean, there were 2 issues. One, I think since around Christmas time, they've changed the way they're playing, and they're much more open in the attack than what they were before. So definitely a change around there. But secondly, you've also got to, and here's one for Corey Baker on Slack earlier today. I mean, they're vastly outperforming their XG. The last 6 or 7 weeks, it's crazy how much they're overperforming. So there's certainly an element where it's like, well, it's not going to carry on. But I think Uruguay is playing so well on the eye and on the numbers that he will probably be my 3rd player if I went for a 3rd Arsenal player, which I will, but it won't probably be yet.
Yeah, fair enough.
But definitely, I mean, Saliba, you can't go wrong with the caveat that, I mean, A, on the one hand, it's the best defense, but on the B, they still have that City DNA where they seem to give away a stupid goal every now and again, which really hurts you big time when you have double defense.
Doesn't it, though?
So I'm not quite ready for that yet.
Even at 6-0, right, with how one-sided that game had been yesterday, folks sitting there with 2 defenders, I'm sure were still sweating it, because you're right, it's still something that it wouldn't have shocked you, would it? Yeah, interesting. I mean, so you mentioned...
but you...
Sorry, carry on.
I was going to say, I should probably mention to be completely honest, that I thought I'd captain Haaland.
Okay, all right.
And all week I was chatting with Tim Walpole of this parish about, he was saying, I'm capping Saka. I was like, no, mate, I'm going safe with Haaland. And then when I started going onto the fantasy football things live score, I got quite a shock when I realised that I didn't have double Haaland points. So then I was hoping big time for Saka to, give me one of those strokes of luck that sometimes make or break a season. And then they played the second best team in Sheffield, and he came off at halftime. So it was really, there you go. I got more points out of it than if I'd have captained Haaland.
True.
So
can't feel too bad. Yeah, and absolutely right, mate. And that midfield there with Palmer, Son, Saka, Foden, Garnacho being the cheaper option in on your bench there. It looks pretty much like that's the one that people will be orientating to. Would you agree with that, Craig, or would you saying that actually now we need to be reapportioning funds and looking elsewhere? What are your thoughts on that midfield?
Yeah, I think the second of the two. I mean, most people watching this, hoping that they didn't copy me in 24, will have their wild card in their pocket. And if you're
Yeah,
wild
let's assume
carding,
that they
you're
do.
either going to
Yeah.
wild card. So if you've got a wild card in your pocket, you're probably going to wild card in 30, 31,
Hmm.
or 35. Certainly, if you go for the former, and even if you don't, I think from 30 onwards, Salah, assuming he's fit, is essential.
Yeah.
So, as always, somebody has to go.
Hmm.
And then it becomes the question of whom.
Mm.
Is it Saka? Is it Son? Or is it Foden? It's one of those three, unless
Hmm.
you've got some serious team value that I can't compete with. So one of those three goes, and it could well be Foden who goes.
Well, I mean, there was some
But I
discussion,
haven't.
wasn't
I
there?
genuinely haven't decided yet. Yeah,
No.
yeah. So,
I mean, there was some
um,
discussion, wasn't there, on the Slack channel around the possibility of losing Phil Foden. There's been obviously a lot of talk in the media about form of his life, obviously, and a great brace in the Manchester derby. And from an FPL perspective, he's been amazing recently. Talk to me about the case for selling him, mate. Explain for it in layman's terms what the case would be to lose Phil Foden to accommodate Mo Salah.
well, first of all, he's overperforming his numbers. Second of all, Haaland is underperforming his numbers. So everything's relative and contextual. So I think we're comparing the fact that Foden is fine delivering on
Mm-hmm.
his numbers and his on the eye promise, and the fact that Haaland suddenly can't hit a cow's ass with a banjo, all things being relative. And
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to happen for a long time. I mean, he's
Can't see it.
historically somebody who doesn't do that. So I can't see him keeping it up. But on the eye, I mean, to be fair, he doesn't seem the player of last year or the first half of the season. So something's not quite clicking. But Haaland, who's not quite clicking, is still pretty fucking awesome, right? So
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
it's hard to go against him. But that's essentially the decision I have coming.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, already this week. Already this week, I had this because chopping and changing between game weeks, but like pretty much everybody who hasn't already got him, I'll be bringing in Solanke this week.
Of course. What a
And I have
beautiful
two
double
routes.
that
I
is,
can.
Craig, isn't it? Can you imagine
Yeah,
have you thought of a better double in FPL history that in on paper in terms of how it looks with those two home games? It's stunningly
yeah,
good, isn't it?
it is, and maybe it's because I got screwed on 25. But I think all
Mm-hmm.
things being relative, I'm not having quite the boner that everyone else is having about 25 because I loaded up on these, otherwise quite shitty teams in my
Yeah,
wildcard and got pretty badly burned. So I'm a
yeah,
little bit less horny for especially Bournemouth assets in 28. Excuse me, yeah, 28.
yeah. And 28.
Especially defensively, because in the last game, I mean, they got, even against Burnley, I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't that there were no chances against them, quite the opposite. I
No,
mean,
no,
they weren't that hard to get through, and Luton are not shabby going forward. So,
they're not. Yeah,
um, I'm, I mean, Solanke, yes, I can see the attraction of Solanke really, really high. I can
yeah.
see as I guess when I get onto that differential, I can see Clivett and I will say Tavernier, which sounds awfully European. How do you say his name, Tom? Come on. Not
Yeah, that sounds
Tavernier.
good. That's how I'd say it. Yeah,
Is that how you're
Tavernier's
saying
good.
it? Right. Okay.
People know who you
Tavernier.
mean.
We'll
Yeah, let's
stick
go
with
with
that.
that. But I
You know
mean,
what I
what
mean.
you're
You got
saying is offensively. We're saying Bournemouth from an attacking perspective with those two home fixtures still fine to target. Solanke's, of course,
Yeah.
the massive, clear, obvious standout. Probably not.
Yeah.
Don't need to belabor that point, but defensively, and I'm with you, mate. Like I've thought that for some time. As good as these fixtures are we really that confident in the Bournemouth defence?
Yeah. No, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, I mean, the only one who vaguely interests me from the defence, and this is just to caveat this. I mean, I'm on unquestionably. I'm on free hit 29.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm locked into that. I don't need to think about who's playing in 29. But looking ahead down the line,
Yeah.
the one who does interest me is Neto, the
Mm-hmm.
goalkeeper.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess we'll know if I'm reading all these tweets right. And I've listened to James's pod, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so it's all caveated with who quite knows. But if Brighton get their ass handed to them against Roma in the Europa League on Thursday night, and it looks like they won't go forward in the competition, then that would free up their 34 for their blank fixture to move there, which would mean they have a potential double in 34. That, if Brighton get a tonking on Thursday, would make me interested in bringing in Nato for a hit for one of my two absolutely shite goalkeepers who I have no faith in whatsoever. I'll be quite happy with that. There's never a good time for a hit. There's never, ever, ever a free transfer for a goalkeeper hanging around. So if you want to change keeper, just do it. Take the hit. But it needs to be somebody who is
Dublin. Yeah. I mean, to be fair to you, to be fair to you, Craig, that is something you've been pretty consistent about throughout the whole season when we've done these videos and previously as well. So that is consistent with your FPL strategy in terms of what you've been recommending. I love that as a tactic for further down the stretch as well. We've kind of already bled into it, guys, so apologies for that. We are now going to take a look at how Craig's bus team is set up ahead of double game week 28. Okay, so you can see, of course, guys, it's going to be relatively similar to the previous slide that we were already looking at. But we can see Harry Maguire's found his way back into the team here with that home game against Everton. I don't think we have prognosis on the severity of his injury right now, but United could do with him back, right? They're so weak on that left-hand side of defence right now, Craig, aren't they? They really could do with Maguire being back in selection. Let's get straight into it, though, mate. Transfer plans ahead of double game week 28 with the certainty that you talked around in terms of your plans for free hitting in 29. If terms of FPL managers are in the same boat, where are you thinking, where are you recommending for people who've got, say, either one or two free transfers? What's your advice?
Just to be clear, when you say are in the same boat, do you mean are free hitting in 29?
That's right. Yeah, people who are definitively set on free hitting in 29. In terms of the game week before and in 28, what are your transfer recommendations with that in mind?
I mean, you need Solanke. That's if only as a shield.
Yeah, I think you have to, don't you?
I can't see it. Yeah. And the question for me is actually for whom? The obvious one, and the one that once I decided on free hit should be the one for that was Tony. So Solanke to Tony, and stick with Haaland and stick with Foden, and hope that they get something against Liverpool.
Every chance, feasible. Right?
Yeah. The X factor is, well, what about if I stick with Tony and go with Haaland out for Solanke?
Like it?
I'm not convinced of it, but it opens up, and the reason I say that is not entirely 28 and 29 dependent. It opens up the money in game week 30 for me to do a free transfer for Garnacho to Salah. And that's very much me dependent because I haven't got a wild card in my back pocket, as you may be aware. So I'm thinking, how can I just maximize it going forward? And then down the line, probably around 32, 33, bring Haaland back in. But for most people, it's Solanke, and thereafter it's Morris, who actually is pretty equal on numbers or even ahead the last 5 or 6 from what I was looking at against Solanke. So the form is with him, if not the fixtures. But and that's kind of the thing. I mean, we're back to my game week 25 shit show that we're putting an awful lot of weight upon some, all things being equal, crap teams. And you don't know how crap teams are going to perform every single weekend. There's a reason they're not in the top 6 and they're not consistent. End of. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot, which means that there are huge games to be made. I mean, you can quite easily end up on a Tavernier or a Clivert. I mean, it'd be a ballsy man who goes for Clivert, but you can quite easily end up on a Morris versus Solanke. Solanke gets 2 blanks in a row, and Morris can just bag 2 pens. He's on pens, right? So I mean, it's it can really, really swing. So Solanke first, Clivert next. Not Clivert, sorry, Morris. Then I probably would be looking at Clivert if you're really, really getting punty. I'm not feeling that punty, but certainly from the front line, that's where I'll be looking. But for me, notwithstanding the desire for Salah in in 30. I think it ends up being Solanke Tony to Solanke.
Tony to Solanke.
I
Yeah.
can't see past it. I think it's just too obvious.
Yeah, no, and it's obvious for a reason, right? We talked around how attractive that fixture is, particularly from an attacking perspective for Bournemouth. And we are going to talk around Erling Haaland, aren't we, Craig, in a slide in a couple of moments' time in relation to sort of captaincy options over the next several game weeks. We did talk about it on last week's video as well. But once you start overlaying that captaincy lens over that particular period, I guess the case for looking elsewhere does become a little more compelling, right? If you're going to spend that amount of money on a player and not captain them, the questions do start to need to be asked, don't they? Okay. All right, cool. I mean, in terms of
the... for me,
let's if Harry Maguire was to be ruled out of this game week and the injury is more severe than we originally thought, Craig, is there any thought around trying to use the transfers to pick up a double game week player, or would you just be rolling in with Bradley with that solid fixture against Man City? What are your thoughts around that?
No, the several of the I mean, going back to they are crap teams for a reason, right? But I mean, there's a few of the Bournemouth people I'd be quite happy to go with for 1 week. I have to look down my list for the names, right? So we have, I can't even say them properly. I'm so sorry. Zabani.
We'll know. Yeah, we'll know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the bloke who starts with K. Let's just go with that. So, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, so we're still thinking Bournemouth defence is acceptable for this, right? Yeah.
I mean, the other option is to go for Saliba, but it gives me a few issues down the line in terms of what transfers I could make in 30. And again, we go back to the midweek game for Brighton against Roma. If Brighton have a bad result against Roma, that would swing it toward me going for a Bournemouth defender, because at least I know that come 34, I possibly have a double air, which would be interesting. I mean, on the other hand, Maguire quite probably has a double, and not even a bad double in 34. So I'm not overly keen on moving him out unless I absolutely have to. It could also be Diego Costa, who goes out for Saliba. So I'm not hugely pressurised in that front. But
no,
but one of the Bournemouth guys or one of the Arsenal guys, but I would like to save that spot open for one of the Arsenal attackers. So that's why I'm not hugely keen yet on locking myself into the double defence, not least of which because of this just the weekly ball ache of sweating your arse off watching an Arsenal game, knowing that if they concede, as they often do, with a silly goal, then that's an awful lot of points and bonus points out of the window.
That disappear.
So I'm not quite there yet.
And agree. And Maguire's the sort of player owners will want to keep, like you say, with that value and the prospect of a double down the stretch as well, known. And the fact is, he makes his way into that team these days, right? With Martinez out longer term, the fact is you'd expect him to be playing, wouldn't you, at the moment he's back available after injury. Yeah, all right. Thanks, mate. That's good. Okay, so we're now going to take a little look, guys, at what a free hit team might look like if you are doing so in blank game week 29. Let's take a little look. Guys, it takes a particular set of circumstances to see a slide that we create that has this amount of West Ham United on it. And look, the stars have aligned, right, mate? So good on you for including West Ham players. We still can't manage to get 3 into a starting team, even when there's only like a few fixtures. But it's nice to see that we've actually got some options. So, look, you must have had fun creating this.
No. Emerson's on the bench, Tom. Emerson's on the bench.
Yeah, he is on the bench. Yeah, no, I'm delighted, man. I'm delighted. It's good to see the claret and blue up in light. So I think when we were preparing for this video, Craig, what this said to me is it's a crap game week, right? Isn't it, to use a free hit for? Even though many of us, myself and you included, are locked into this, it's not a great game week, is it? Are you expecting much in the return in relation to how this team is going to perform?
No, but I'm expecting a few big swings from some really unfortunate or fortunate, depending on which end of it you are, results for the players. The reason I ended up on free hit, I mean, I could have ended up and stuck with not free hitting in 29, which was my original plan. It would
Yeah.
have taken a few hits to get 9 and a few more, another one to get 10. But the problem wasn't so much the team I got out in 29. It was more the ball ache it gave me in 28 and in 30 onwards when I would have
30.
my team full
Yeah.
of crap. Without, and that's particular to me, I think, without having my wild card in the back pocket to get my arse out of it. So that's why I chose to free hit and keep things, all things being relative, a bit more simple compared to the mess that I put myself in. That said, the thought I'm having, and that's why, I mean, when you look at that team, it's like it's not hugely different to what a slightly more astute manager than myself would have ended up on for a non-free hit. So I'm quite conscious of who one, but I'm thinking, who can you get in on a free hit who anybody who planned for it wouldn't have?
Like
Kudos is one.
Kudos is one. He definitely is.
Kudos is definitely one. Who else? I've got Douglas Lewis in there, but everyone's, every Tom, Dick, and Harry has got Douglas fucking Lewis in their team, haven't they, Tom? Right? Yeah,
they do.
All these casuals with Douglas Lewis. So anyway, we're gonna. I've got him in there, but it could easily be Morgan Gibbs-White. It's not that I think he's gonna score a 15 pointer, but plan for this week is gonna have Morgan Gibbs-White. So I think my Douglas Lewis probably becomes Morgan Gibbs-White. Reguilon.
I like this.
Maybe
I like this. So you're basically saying
Reguilon hasn't. I mean, the same goes for the Spurs guys. Porro could become Udoji because nobody who's planned for this week has got anything other than Porro in their back line from Spurs. There's the other Danish chap at Brentford who could be an option there for is there Reguilon. And as for
I like
Tony,
Fulham striker as well, Craig. I like the Fulham striker who's been
the Muniz. You mean Muniz, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's been good.
So that was my other option with Tony. If Tony, I don't know, I got him in. I think he gave me my wild card the week before. I've been a little bit disappointed with Tony since I got him in. He didn't really deliver what I thought he would. So I could quite easily, I think anybody who's planned for it will have Tony. So again, I could quite easily move Tony on the phone, Muniz, whatever his name is, and go with that as a punt. And if you were at 15k, I wouldn't necessarily suggest it, but when you're at 250k, then
it's different. I got a couple of questions, mate. So, I mean, let's talk. So, if you were in a different situation now, and we were talking around how many players you'd want to have to avoid the need to use a free hit in this type of game week, because I'm looking at this team and I'm just wondering where the exposure points are in terms of players that you would expect to have a haul in them in a single game week. And you'd sort of say Heung-min Son, Jared Bowen, Ollie Watkins, maybe Tony. Not seeing much more outside of those, right? Would you agree, Craig?
Oh, I thought Hammer, like yourself, would have been big enough kudos, but I do agree, and that's why I say Morgan's Gibbs-White, because I mean everyone will have Douglas Luiz. Many will have Douglas Luiz. Very few will have Morgan Gibbs-White. Morgan's Gibbs-White or Alanga, for that matter, have got a haul in them, no question. So that's definitely an option there. Udoji, he's not the same FPL fantasy stuff that Porro is, but on his day, he can have a double-digit haul, no problem whatsoever. So I think you have to.
There's more than that.
I think you have to scratch around.
What I'm saying is,
but you are right.
If you got to a situation where, say, if you weren't free hitting and you had, say, those four of, say, Son, Bowen, Watkins, Tony in your team, would you be recommending to those folks, if they didn't have a lot outside of that, say maybe one, maybe two others, would that suffice? I mean, 6 feels very low to rock into a game we can feel comfortable. I'm just wondering whether or not you kind of would, looking at this. Would you feel like that would be sufficient?
I think if you had Watkins, Son, Madison, Bowen, Porro, a keeper, and one more, you're fine.
Okay, so, you're more like a 7 or 8.
But I think 8 would be my
minimum
cut-off point. I don't think there's a huge difference. I don't think there's a huge differential coming from those extra players. I mean, I'm hoping for, picking a few who can deliver some surprises, but I'm not expecting it. But as I say, going back to my last week, then the players I brought in, albeit for a hit this week, were Saka and Palmer, who quite obviously don't help me in 29 in any shape or form, but they help me going forwards because I haven't got a wild card. So for me, in my particular circumstances, it completely makes sense to book in the free hit after the wild card disaster. So, but for most people, I would say 8 is fine.
Yeah. Okay.
There aren't really any fantastic standout.
There aren't, which is what kind of prompted the question, really, mate. I just wondered whether or not typically the answer is 8 when I've asked other folks in other seasons as well. I just wondered if this particular blank game week, then the number comes down, but you're suggesting it doesn't. Do you think maybe in terms of the goalkeeper, not that we like talking about goalkeepers on these videos because it's pretty friggin' boring, but I've been really impressed by Vicario in goal for Spurs as well. Do you think it could be a shout for him, and then you look elsewhere in the defensive setup, or do you think Porro is too compelling because of his attacking options, and you need to have him with 2 offensive guys from Spurs as well? I've just been quite impressed by Vicario over the season.
No, yeah, sure, but I mean, you need Vicario either to make an insane amount of saves or to keep a clean sheet. And the first one might happen, the second one's never happening. No. So I take your point. Yeah, he's doing good as a goalkeeper, but from an FPL perspective, I just don't see the attraction.
No.
Not this week.
Fair enough.
Sorry, that's just...
No, it's fair.
Answer, but no, I just don't... Yeah.
It's good. I'm just looking elsewhere in terms of whether or not there are any other potential avenues we could look to recommend for those on a free hit. I guess from the West Ham side, at different points this season, James Ward-Prowse has been viable, right? Craig, he's given the kind of drip feed of points at different points of the season. Do you think in a free hit side you'd look to bring in somebody like that as well? And obviously Kudus is the more exciting, I guess, high ceiling player, but James Ward-Prowse has got history of double-digit returns as well. Would you endorse him on a free hit as well?
I think there are still some other players who I would have above JWP. I would have.
You think he's a better picture over say Douglas Luiz, for example, who it's been great for me, but he does tend to do a lot better at home rather than away.
But he has pens.
He does have pens.
Oh, hang on, is JWP on pens?
Well, it's an interesting question.
Who's on pens or West Ham?
We don't tend to get many. I think he would be on. He would be on penalties. It's either him or Bowen, I would suggest, but I would suspect it would be Ward-Prowse.
Okay. Yeah, I would be more inclined to go for Bailey over JWP. I'd also be, if we were feeling plenty, I would definitely be. I don't know. Maybe I've just got a JWP thing where I'm not hugely enamoured by him this season. But you have to correct me if I'm being unfair. But
you're not being unfair. No.
Okay, so Louise, Bailey, Elanga, and Gibbs White would appeal to me more than JWP. That's going to be a bit harsh, but those are the ones who would appeal to me there. Yeah. For me, he's not hugely interesting.
No, and we've missed out a captaincy armband on this slide, Craig. Heung-min Son, would we expect for this free hit team?
Yeah, if you're being sensible.
And if you're not?
If you're not, then I would say Madison or honestly, I think it's a crapshoot. I think it's an absolute crapshoot this week that you could be. It's just a night at the casino. Yeah. Son's the obvious one, and if you wanted to go against, it could be any of the others who would be an option. I would probably have it on. I'd probably have my advice on Watkins, in all honesty. I just don't trust your defence.
Oh, God, Christ, no. I trust them to let you down. That's the thing you can trust them to do. So I just wonder if rank dependent, whether or not you'd sort of say, okay, I'm going to free hit to a team here and focus on a player where the EO is going to be minuscule. Would you roll the dice and say, actually, this is a time to gamble and put that captaincy armband on a player that you just know, bar for free hitters, is just not going to be in your competitors' squads? Or do you still actually think, no, it's still the right play to go for a highly owned player like Son or Ollie Watkins?
I think it's quite feasible to go for the second, third kind of highest likely scorer. I don't really foresee anybody outside the obvious people having a foreseeable chance of getting decent points. I mean,
No.
kudos, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to our previous conversation, who's really going to be uh, available to be off template, who people haven't planned for? I mean, kudos, Morgan, Gibbs White, Bailey. Are you really going to captain them? I mean, then you're getting really into last chance saloon stuff, and we're nowhere near there yet. That's what
No, we're
Gameweek
not.
37's for. So,
Yeah.
I think it's too soon. So by all means, go tilt and go for the second highest expected score, which I guess I haven't even looked. I'm assuming that Son is the obvious choice
I think so.
for 29. I presume that Watkins will be shortly after. Madison, I could see doing something against Fulham, but I mean, I think for me it's between Son and Watkins, and I'll try and make up some ground on those 3 or 4 players who are outside the well prepared template.
Yeah, like it. What good advice, mate. All right, cool. So we've talked around captaincy options for a free hit team, and that leads nicely into a discussion around captaincy options for the next several game weeks. Okay, guys, so this is a bit of a refresh on a slide that we presented last week. We obviously brought it forward to blank game week 29 and looking all the way ahead to way down the stretch, game week 33. Goodness me, I haven't thought about that just yet. I'm sure Craig has, though. So we talked around captaincy options for blank game week. Fantasy Football Fix is suggesting Son is the correct player to go for. Obviously, up against 3 players who blank. That's no great shakes, but I think he does still represent a good choice. We're not seeing heaps of green, though, for Erling Haaland here, are we, Craig? So what's your read on this kind of captaincy matrix options that we're presenting for these 4 premium assets?
Well, let's forget 29 because most are going to have free hit
and we've talked around that.
Options aren't really available that week. Yeah. So going from 30 to 33, I think that's right because right now, until the international break, we don't know what 34 has in store until the fixtures get confirmed, really. I feel quite certain that I'll be captaining Salah, unquestionably in 30. And that's primarily because I think his ownership will be at the lowest in 30.
Okay.
And I don't imagine I'll not be captaining him until I'm not quite certain why your 32 has Son higher than Salah in
the 5.9. It's a good shout. Yeah, there's a typo there. So good observations.
I'll be having Salah 30, 31, 32, 33 as my captain. No questions asked. That kind of goes back to the point.
Mm-hmm. Go on. I was just going to say, it's great to see a metric where it's suggesting 10.6 points. It just highlighting how bad Sheffield United have been, which you're beaming at me.
I love it. I bet second best team in Sheffield.
Yeah, I bet you do. So we're saying that. So your advice is Salah needs to come in for 30, right? Salah needs to come in for 30. The viewers need to have a plan to get presumably fit Salah back for game week 30.
It depends who you bring him in for, right? Because as things stand, if I was being logical, then I would bring him in for Foden. By which I mean I'll bring Salah in for Foden. But I feel uneasy about that.
I bet you do.
Such is the form of Foden in the form of his life. Even if it's not on the numbers, it's he's passing the eye test by a country mile. Whereas Son, and fortunately Son had a few weeks to audition for the chop, basically. So if I reach 30 and Son really hasn't blown me away, then fine. Son's out in 30 and in comes Salah. I mean, the numbers are pretty equal in 30, but it's the ownership, which for me will become the focus of my intention for the next few weeks. Or the weeks to the end, unless things start going completely crazy. But so absolutely, Salah in 30, and that's 30 is the big one because I think many will wait until 31, when they wildcard to bring him in. So for me, it's a sap. I mean, it could even be this. It's not going to be because I don't think he hauls against Manchester City. But I mean, you could say why not this week and take out Haaland for Solanke and bring in Salah for what's his name, the Manchester United guy, Garnacho.
Foden. Yeah,
too risky. But I'll quite happily wait till the 30. But then from 30 until 33, it's Salah all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you're
it's
right.
Not even close.
I'd struggle to see you losing Heung-min Son before a home game against Luton. Greg, could you seriously see yourself sacrificing Heung-min Son even for Mo Salah against Brighton in that 30 scenario? I guess he'd have to have been pretty crap in the blank game week.
Exactly, that's exactly my point. So I mean, if he underwhelms in 28 and 29, I don't think those decisions can be very hard. Luton or not Luton. I don't think Luton. I mean, they're bad, but they're not that bad. They're not Sheffield United bad.
They're not. You've been waiting to use that line. Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
So I mean, yeah, Foden would be the obvious departee, and I'm not quite ready yet to say goodbye to Phil Foden. So
no.
It's a decision for 30, but someone is leaving for Salah in 30. That's the definitive. This or no.
And I think that's a great way to wrap things up. Actually, in this video, we've got basically recommending to the viewers to have some kind of Mo Salah plan ahead of game week 30, guys, and it's difficult to do, right? We looked at your midfield and praised it so openly at the beginning of the video in terms of how you've constructed that midfield, but someone's got to go to accommodate him. You can't not have him for that run of fixtures, particularly 30 and 31, and I'd say 32 and of course 33 as well. So yeah, someone's got to go. It's going to be interesting to see who it is. Craig, mate, been an absolute pleasure. This is going to turn around. That was but a blip 3 weeks ago. That graph is going to be back on an upward trajectory, I assure you. Anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's it. We covered it.
Good. Yeah, we covered it. All right, guys, cool. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video. Do please smash a like on the video on your way out if you did enjoy it, and do leave a comment down below for Craig, and he will get back to you, I'm sure. And guys, thanks very much for tuning in at this later stage of the game. It will be back to normal schedule over the weekend, I promise you, ahead of the next few game weeks. Guys, do take care, have a great game week, and I'll see you all next weekend. Bye-bye.